who have watched Game of Thrones, Star Wars, and probably the Korean dramas, Chloe. I remember when we were, I'm not into it, but I was hearing Chloe, what's Chloe? And found out it's Crash Landing on You. And when I got into it, I said, wow. Didn't realize how good Korean dramas is. But anyway, yeah, and then The Godfather. So, what made these shows popular? What made them so popular that people would want to watch them? What do you think? Their stories, their story plots are spiced up with drama, love, and of course, there's action, fantasy. What else? Intrigues, betrayals, and deception, and suspense, right? And those are elements that people look up to. You're not just excited about the hero, but more so, right, on what will happen next to those delirious antagonists or villains in the stories, right? Sometimes they're the ones that you would be waiting for. Oh, I wish this would happen to that person, to him, and you want what is really expected of the villain to happen, right? Elements that make you binge watch the show, right? And in reality, many battles, wars that shape the history of the world had been ended not only by efforts of leaders and heroes, but also by self-serving spies, collaborators, traitors, who betrayed their people and nations, protagonists and villains of the real world. Numerous spies were made to obtain information and secure victories, which may many times prove successful. For all you know, the Ukraine war, even the ones in Israel, there would most likely be spies, right? That they would send and gather informations about the enemy. So, because of the intelligence brought by these traitors or spies, many lives have been saved or lost. And that was how history has been shaped. But in the end, not everyone got to enjoy the fruits of their betrayal for long. Right? Let's look at this example. John Walker, U.S. Navy spy, arrested by FBI in 1985. Now, Walker was able to pull off the biggest treason in the history. Imagine, for 20 years before he was finally arrested. And how was he arrested? How was he discovered? Not by intelligence, but thanks to his wife reporting him to FBI. And why? Why did the wife reported him for all those 20 years? And that was after their divorce, and John refused to pay her spousal support. So those who are thinking of divorcing somebody, beware. Don't neglect the spousal support. But anyway, let's look at another example. This one, Alfred Red, traitor. On May 25, 1913, former head of Austria-Hungary military espionage committed suicide in Vienna. And he was responsible for the death of 500,000, Imagine that 500,000 of his countrymen. Red had betrayed Austria-Hungary's spy network and had sold sensitive informations on war preparations to Russia's military intelligence during the First World War. He committed suicide after Austrian police discovered his double game espionage. Now let's go further down in history. Marcus Brutus, conspirator. What's so amazing about this is he's the nephew and adopted son of dictator Julius Caesar, and yet he participated in his assassination in 44 BC. It is considered one of the greatest betrayals in history. The action of Brutus against the dictator Julius Caesar, just imagine, he's the adopted son. And although his wife opposed his betrayal, he joined the Roman senators who brutally murdered Caesar, convincing himself that Caesar's death is for the greater good of Rome. And, of course, not to be left out in the list is Judas Iscariot, traitor, treasurer, one of the 12 apostles, and for 30 silver pieces, betrayed Christ by kissing him on the cheek, and let the authorities know his identity. His act led to Jesus' death by crucifixion and made Judas the most notorious. Imagine that, the most. The other one was one of the greatest. Judas, the most notorious traitor in history. The name Judas once was a very common name, but now has all but disappeared. No parents wants to name their child after the most notorious traitor in history. Imagine your name being Judas. I don't think so. You would want that, right? But the question is, how then, during those times, could Judas betray the Son of God? Why? Why? How was he able to? What happened? Betrayal, deception, unfaithfulness, treachery, double cross. This evil act has been part of us since the fall of man at the Garden of Eden. You know that the first bloody betrayal in history was actually done by Cain on his brother Abel. But unfortunately for Judas, this word betrayal or traitor became synonymous with his name. Because with Cain, what's the popular praise that gets associated with him? Am I my brother's keeper? Wasn't it? But with Judas, it's traitor, betrayer. Now, Judas is first mentioned in Matthew chapter 10, verse 1 to 4. When Matthew made a list, presents a list of the disciples in pairs with the name of Judas Iscariot. On the 4th verse, Simon the Zealot and Judas Iscariot. He was the last. And this is also where it first mentioned that Judas would be the one to betray Jesus. And Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus. The same phrase who betrayed him or who became a traitor is written of Judas in Mark chapter 3, verse 19, and also in the book of Luke, chapter 6, verse 16. Now, the gospel writers could not help but disclose upfront who Judas will be in Jesus' life. It's like when you're watching something like a series that you love so much, and then the next episode will be the following week, and then you are working, or you don't have the time to really watch the episode right there and then. And would you agree, you don't want people to be spoiling you, right? Especially when you look into social media, there would be spoilers. And that's how I felt about this when the disciples spoiled right away who Judas would be, the one who betrayed him. But remember, the Gospels were written after the fact, right? But unlike those, during those time, they don't know, right? Because ours, we know already about history, about the Bible. And the thing is, who is Judas? Number one of the 12 apostles. Here's the thing. He was part of those that were handpicked by Jesus from the 70 disciples. And it's just not random. Jesus prayed a long night of prayer, if you would read on Luke chapter 6, verse 12 to 13. So as one of the 12 disciples, Jesus chose to accompany him during his ministry. So if you would actually look at it, this means that Judas was privy to the teachings, the miracles, and intimate moments of Jesus' life. Number two, Judas is the treasurer. So probably a person of integrity. Would you agree? Or you don't? Because Judas must have been considered a man of integrity, or he would not have been trusted by others as treasurer, right? Would they choose Matthew or Levi, who was a tax collector? Because you know what tax collectors are. So they wouldn't trust him to become treasurer. Or would the fisherman, farmer, or carpenter volunteer for that position of treasurer? I don't think so, right? And number three, imagine Judas is also empowered. Matthew 10, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits, to heal every, not just some, but every disease and sickness. Number four, he's a witness. Because we know Judas for the end of his life. But we have to understand that he walked and served with Jesus. He was there when Jesus did the first miracle. The Gospels, if you would read, contain no hint that Judas had been a mole or spy infiltrating the inner circle to plan this deceitful act. But, of course, like any of us, Judas is a human being. He's a person. Like all of us. We have inner struggles. Judas also has inner struggle with greed, frustration, doubt. We start to see some of Judas' struggle in the scene of the woman and the alabaster jar, wherein who anointed Jesus at Bethany. And what did Judas do? Judas condemned the woman for wasting an expensive perfume and objected that the money could have been used to feed who? The poor. If you would think that would be a what? A noble act, right? But however, remember, Judas was the treasurer. And he was also stealing from the gifts given for the ministry of Jesus. I could just imagine, maybe during those times, Judas already is beginning to doubt if Jesus was really the Messiah that they are looking for, that they are waiting for. Is he the real Messiah that was prophesied? And why did that happen to Judas? Because during the triumphal entry was far from a king arriving to force his claim on the throne. Because yes, there are a lot of people shouting on Jesus, but who are those? It's made up of ragtag crowd. Nothing. No arms. No revolution. Nothing. Maybe during that time, the Roman soldiers were waiting for anything, any uprising that might happen, because remember, the news is already spreading about a king. But there was nothing. There was no takeover of the government. There was no takeover of the treasury. Because I could just imagine that maybe Judas was already looking forward to getting into that position of, I would be the head of the treasury. Just imagine that. Not just the head of the treasury of Jesus' ministry, but this would be the head of the treasury of the government. But then, madness set in. Frustration, doubt. Because his pursuit of physical riches and position created doubts in his mind and clouded his judgment and denied the reality of who Jesus is. And then he probably thought, I should make something, ways to profit on this situation that I am in right now, and eventually betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Now, after the arrest, Judas witnessed the brutality of Jesus' punishment. And yet, Jesus, knowing who betrayed him, did not curse nor condemn Judas. And this hit his conscience so hard that he was so remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest. But unfortunately, his remorse resulted into suicide. Because Judas might be remorseful, but apparently unrepentant. And instead accepted the logical consequence of his deed and took his own life. And went down as the greatest traitor in history. And I guess, because of that stigma to this name, the other apostle, who is also Judas, right? Or you probably don't remember, Judas instead used Thaddeus He's the one that's commonly known as Saint Jude Thaddeus. So, but was Judas the only one who betrayed Jesus? You probably say, yes. But Judas' act of betrayal may be different in degree, but not in kind, from the many other disloyalties. It's like the passage in Revelation, wherein we read so much about great sins, murder, adultery, witchcraft. But then what was at the very end? And liars. Line up with those great sins. Because at the end, it's still one category. It's a sin. The same with betrayal. Take, for example, Peter. Peter, most notable disciple, outspoken, loyal, impulsive. He told Jesus that he would stay loyal until the end, right? That's how vocal he was. He said, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. And leading up to Jesus' arrest, he remained loyal, right? To the point of pulling out a sword, cutting off a man's ear when they came to arrest Jesus. Thus, when Jesus told Peter that he would openly deny that he knew Jesus, Peter was astonished and declared, and most likely, when he said this, he might be really at the top of his voice, saying, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. But of course, then later, Peter saw the Messiah being arrested and not fighting back. The Messiah was supposed to be what? To be a strong figure, because all that they had at those times were looking forward to a Messiah who would free them from the Roman rule. So their imagination, their thought, their picture of the Messiah was so totally different from what we know right now. But that wasn't what happened, right? Because that Messiah that he saw was pushed around by the religious leaders and the Romans, which probably is why, because what happened with Jesus as the Messiah is leading to the cross. And this instant, fear crept into Peter's heart and he fled because he doesn't want to be crucified too. And fear is a powerful emotion that causes most courageous and loyal to become cowardly and abandoning. Thus, Peter denied Jesus. And after the third time, Jesus looked at him. Then he remembered. And he wept. When Peter remembered what Jesus had said, so he wept out and wept. He went out and wept bitterly. The good thing, Peter's story did not end with him publicly denying Jesus. We see the resurrected Jesus restore Peter, telling him to feed my sheep and take care of the disciples. With all this talk about betrayal and abandonment of Christ, of course, we now want to see the opposite. What the opposite looks like through the example of Christ. Judas, traitor, betrayer, he came with an armed mob to arrest Jesus. Matthew wrote that Judas came with a great multitude with swords and clubs to arrest Jesus. He went to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and then kissed him. But instead of resisting, Jesus replied to Judas, "Do what you came for, traitor." Was it really what he said? No. But instead, according to Matthew 26:47-50, Jesus said, "Do what you came for, friend." Imagine that. Imagine yourself being betrayed. Can you still say to that person who betrayed you, "Friend"? Can you still love the person even after that? Let's look at Peter. Prideful, then denial. Peter, on the other hand, was so prideful in declaring, "Even if," yet eventually denying, "Pastor, I lost my," I don't know, but lobat. Pardon us, technology. And I remember telling my wife today, she was asking me about my laptop, and I said, "No, I don't have to bring it. I don't even print anymore. I used to print." But anyway, yes, with Peter, he was so prideful that says, even if, and then denied Jesus not just once, but 3 times. Yet, how did Jesus responded to Peter's denial? He responded with forgiveness and reconciliation. How about you? If somebody denied you, would you still be able to respond in love, forgiveness, and even go for reconciliation? He's the one who denied me already. Why should I reconcile with a person? Or maybe you are the one who betrayed a person or denied another person. Would you be humble enough to approach the other person? and ask for forgiveness, for restoration, for reconciliation. What about the other disciples? Many of us thought, oh, it's just Judas, it's just Peter. But no. In Mark 14:31, all the other disciples declared with Peter the same thing. Even if they copied Peter when he said, even if, yes, they declared that they would not deny him, that they would not leave him. But what happened? After the arrest in Gethsemane, they all deserted and abandoned Jesus. Yet Jesus still loved them and remained faithful to them. How about you? If your friend deserted you, abandoned you, or your children abandoned you, or your parents abandoned you when you were a child, would you still be able to love them and be faithful to them? You might think it's just Judas, Peter, the disciples. But they are the same as you and me. You know what? I don't know of a more touching or saddening contrast between two human destinies than Peter and Judas. Both assumed leadership within the group of Jesus' disciples. Both saw and heard the wondrous words and things that Jesus did. They were witnesses, both of them. Both went through the same fluctuating cycle of hope, of triumph, and fear, disillusion, and doubt. But as the stakes increased, both denied their master. And there, the similarity breaks off at that point. Judas, yes, remorseful, but unfortunately unrepentant, and accepted whatever is the logical thing for his action. Took his own life. He died unwilling to receive what Jesus had come to offer: forgiveness, grace, love. And went down as the greatest traitor in history. But as for Peter, yes, he was humiliated. Imagine being so vocal and then denying Jesus with the rest of the other disciples, knowing what he did. And he wept bitterly for what he did. But the good thing with Peter, he's still open to Jesus' message of grace and forgiveness, and went to lead a revival in Jerusalem and did not stop until he had reached Rome. Jesus did not condemn Peter for this moment of denial and struggle, but instead he showed him love and reconciliation. For those of us who have let Jesus down, there are times we might not be as brutal as Judas and Peter, but think of how you might have at work not even shared Jesus, or you might not want people to know you're a Christian, or you might be saying, "Oh, I'm shy to share the gospel." You know what? The good thing is, He still shows open arms to forgive us and restore us to a better hope. The greatest showing of grace and mercy was Jesus seeking out the disciples who abandoned Him, denied Him publicly, and doubted His love and power. To the likes of you and me. In spite of our shortcomings, in spite of our sins, in spite of our abandonment of Jesus, Jesus remained faithful to us. Jesus is the ultimate example of faithfulness, loyalty, love, and friendship. All of us have experienced being betrayed, being denied, being deserted, being abandoned by friends, or betrayed the moment trust is breached. It may not be as huge as Judas and Peter's, but the moment trust is breached or betrayed, it happened to us, right? As married couples, as parents and children, as siblings, friends, co-workers. How did we react? Are we forgiving? Yes, it might be hard. You may say, "Oh, no, it hurts. I was stabbed deeply." But you know what? We can still forgive. Yes, we might not be able to do it with our own power. But remember, in Jesus, we can do everything through Him. Be able to forgive or be able to ask for forgiveness. We're not perfect. Everyone in here. We're broken people. All people who would go through those doors, one way or another, were hurt. We experienced that. And for those of us who have experienced the grace and love of Christ, something that we should be sharing with open arms. Be accepting to anybody, to everybody. Remember, we are a community of forgiven people, saved by grace, saved by love.